Awesome. Thank you very much, Jen. If you want to go with lead teacher, that's cool too. Anyways, awesome talk by Justin just a moment ago. Really love FormKit myself. And anyways, won't get into that, but just a quick introduction. My name is Daniel Kelly. And before I joined on at Vue School, I was a full stack developer, worked with Laravel on the back end and Vue.js on the front end. If you can't already tell by the flannel I'm wearing, I live in the southern United States. So shout out to Roll Tide. If anybody is in the southern US, you will understand what I'm saying. But anyways, let's get on to the topic at hand. All right, so we're going to be talking about some patterns for large-scale Vue.js applications. So the question that I want to answer with you today is, what is the best way to structure a Vue.js app so that you can continue to maintain it the larger it grows, and you can continue to add on more features the bigger it gets, right? Why is this important? Because we've certainly all had this feeling before, right? Maybe we've even had this feeling when it comes to working on some code we've written in the past. So really the goal of this talk is to try to eliminate this feeling as much as humanly possible. Okay, it's not going to be completely possible, but yeah, that's the goal. Okay, so here are my tips for building a large-scale Vue.js application. The first tip is that predictability is super, super important. And to be honest, the key to predictability is standards. Now, I know that's not a flashy topic. I know that's not an exciting topic necessarily, but this is important when it comes to building maintainable applications. We need to make sure the code bases are predictable. All right. So where can we find some standards for predictability? The first and official place is in the Vue.js style guide that's provided as a part of the official docs. Okay. I want to go over just a few examples of what's in that style guide. So inside of the style guide is some component standards, namely that single file components should be Pascal case. Okay. We should prefix base components with the word app or base. I prefer app myself as it starts with A and puts all those base components near the top of my components directory. Okay. It also mentions that we should have multi-worded names for our components. This is actually more than just a style thing. This is actually about preventing conflict with existing or future HTML elements. Okay. It also suggests that you prefix single instance components with the word the. So these are components that only exist on your page once, one at a time on your page. They're not going to be reused in multiple places, right? They're typically layout kind of components, things like the header, the sidebar, and so on. It also suggests that you prefix your tightly coupled child components with the name of the parent component. So for instance, if you had a to-do list item and that item only ever appeared inside of a to-do list component, then yeah, prefix it with to-do list, okay? And then the same thing over here on the right-hand side. If I had a location map field, like this is a special kind of form input for a specific form, then prefix it with the name of the component that the form is, okay? So these may seem fairly simple, and really it is. But the idea here is that you have these standards that make your components directory predictable. Somebody can come in here never having worked on the project before, but if they've worked on other Vue projects and know these component standards, they'll automatically know, okay, app button is this reusable thing I can reuse in multiple places. Job form location map field is specific to the job form, right? So simple thing to do, but it can be a huge productivity boost in terms of just being able to navigate through your files. I'm not going to go over all the different rules inside of the style guide, but I did think it was worth noting. You can go and read the style guide for yourself, okay? But I did think it was worth noting that the style guide is currently a little out of date. Most of the examples are in the options API only, and there are no rules currently for script setup in the composition API, but there are still plenty of rules in there that are agnostic to whichever API you're using. Okay, so plenty of rules that apply to both options and composition API. Okay, So another source of standards I think that we have is the officially recommended tooling on the official website, the docs website, right? Um, these are tools like Pinia. These are tools like Vite. Um, I bring this up because of mistakes learned in the past, right? Times where, well, let's be honest, it was a project where Vuex at the time was the officially recommended state management tool. I just honestly didn't like mutations. The verbose nature of it just rubbed me the wrong way. And so I built my own global state management solution for this application we were building. And yeah, you can guess what happened. Uh, in the end, it ended up biting me in the butt. Not only was some functionality not there, I had to write this manual caching stuff that I wouldn't have to deal with if I had just used Vuex. But also, when other people started being onboarded onto the project, because I started the project alone, but then other developers started coming on to help me, they had no idea what this custom state management solution was about, right? So I had to teach them how to use it. So predictability counts on standards. And where can we find standards? In the style guide and in the officially recommended tooling. All right, we can also find some really great standards in Nuxt 3. Nuxt has become such a huge part of the Vue.js community, and a lot of people can come to a Nuxt 3 project structure and automatically be familiar with it because Nuxt is so prevalent in the Vue.js community now. But more on Nuxt in just a little bit. All right, so tip number 2 to building your large-scale applications is take full advantage of your IDE. Okay? It's the tool you're going to be working in most. Make sure it's working for you and not against you. Number 1, for Vue.js devs, that means installing Volar. If you've got Vtur installed right now, uninstall it and install Volar. This is the next generation of Vue support for Visual Studio Code. ESLint is also a must-have when it comes to getting the most out of your IDE. It's going to provide these inline spell check kind of little red squiggly marks underneath issues for you. Okay, so this helps you debug things really before they ever become a bug in the browser, right? It literally tells you what's wrong as you're typing. And I guarantee you, if you set up your project with some kind of official Vue scaffolding tool like Vue CLI in the past or the Create Vue tool for Vue 3, you've probably already got ESLint on your project. You just need to make sure your IDE is set up to work with it. Okay? Oh, by the way, this is how easy it is to set up ESLint with a new Vue project. So yeah, if you aren't using it, why not? All right. Also, formatting with your IDE. Definitely enable auto formatting, whether that's with Prettier, ESLint, whatever the case. Don't spend time deleting tabs or formatting spaces versus tabs or any of that. Okay? That's just a pain. By the way, it's this easy to set up Prettier in a brand new V3 project. All right. Besides these tips for getting the most out of your IDE, we also at Vue School have this great course called Visual Studio Code for Vue.js developers. And it's got content on how to create Vue snippets and use Vue snippets, how to use component previews with Volar, how to work with Git in Visual Studio Code, and other things like that that I just don't have time for in this talk. So if you're interested in maximizing the potential of your IDE, definitely check out that course. And for all of you who are on WebStorm, I feel you. I used to be a PHP Storm user myself, but Visual Studio Code is kind of the big game for a lot of people nowadays. And that's kind of what I use at Vue School now and what a lot of our content focuses on. The last way to get the most out of your IDE is really consider using TypeScript. I know for some people it's kind of a scary thing, but it really doesn't have to be. So let me first tell you why you should get into TypeScript. Okay. Number 1, it prevents errors as you develop. You basically get these same spell check style little red squiggly lines, just like with ESLint, but because of the type system, they're on steroids. It's just this whole other level of error checking directly inside of your IDE. It also makes refactors less risky and less stressful. And maybe even most importantly, I really love this, is that it gives the autocomplete in my IDE superpowers. What does that mean? Well, I could have, let's say, an object, and I start typing the name of that object, and then I can type dot, and then it would automatically show me what properties are available on that object. And that's just one example of what TypeScript can do for you. We also have a course at Vue School on this. I'd love to dive further into it in this talk, but definitely check this out if you aren't familiar with TypeScript and want to implement it in your projects. All right. By the way, Nuxt 3 supports TypeScript by default, and this is really what I love about Nuxt 3. And to be honest, at this point, whenever I start a new Vue project, whether it be it for a course or a side project or just having fun, I actually just go straight to a Nuxt 3 project. But Nuxt 3 supports TypeScript by default, and what this means is you don't have like the high barrier for entry for TypeScript like you once did. Once you had to kind of set up things and get your project set up to use it. Now, if you start a Nuxt 3 project, it's literally already there, and all you have to do is add lang equals ts onto a component somewhere, and you can start dabbling with TypeScript. Okay, you could use JavaScript components everywhere else. You just want to try it out in one single component, you just add that lang equals ts. So really great way to get started in TypeScript. And by the way, Nuxt even generates some types on the fly for you. Nuxt 3 does. So you can get autocomplete options for things like your API endpoints. And this is really cool. All right, so file structure. Here are some good tips on file structure for a large-scale application. I used to have a whole spiel about this, but to be honest, at this point, it's just go with what Nuxt 3 provides because the community is familiar with it. And if you use this file structure within an actual Nuxt 3 project, you not only get the conventions, you get some magic based on the conventions, right? So components are auto-imported if they're in the components directory. Composables are auto-imported if they're in the composables directory. Plugins are auto-registered. Pages are turned into routes, which is really a blast if you have not used that. It's really a huge time saver not to have to manually register your routes. Okay. Tip number 4 is on route naming conventions. Essentially, have some, right? As I mentioned before, I am a Laravel guy, and so I kind of stole all these different conventions from Laravel. Essentially, the assumption here is that most applications are CRUD applications. You're creating, reading, updating, deleting resources, right? And so your route naming structure can reflect that. So if you're like listing all the photos, let's say it's asset management tool and you've got a bunch of photos, there's a page with a grid with a bunch of photos on it, right? That would be like /photos. Okay, so that's the index. And then if you wanted to create an individual photo, like upload a new photo maybe, that would be a /photos/create route. If you're if you're showing an individual photo, that'd be /photos/ whatever the individual identifier is. If you're showing a form to edit that photo. And by the way, you can substitute, blog post or comment or whatever the resource is here for photos. Okay. If you're wanting to show a form to edit that photo, this would be your route here. Okay. So this is how the Laravel community does it. And we can adopt kind of the same thing in the Vue community. So this is what that same thing might look like with file-based routing in Nuxt. So under a pages directory, you could have a photos directory. So this is /photos, right? So index.vue lives at the /photos route. And then I have up here an id.vue. So this is showing the individual photo with that ID. I also have a create.vue, which is that /photos/create. And my edit is just slightly different. Doesn't follow the exact same route structure as for Laravel, but just to keep them all in the same file structure here, this is what I've done for edit. Okay, and this is actually really cool with Nuxt. You can have these dynamic parts, these dynamic parameters in your route actually be a fragment of that route segment. So that's pretty cool. All right. Also, just one other quick tip here. When it comes to components that are only ever used in pages for a particular resource. So if I have a form that's only used for updating or creating my photos, right? Has nothing to do with my comments, nothing to do with my blog posts, nothing to do with any other kind of resource, right? then I like to put a partials directory actually co-located with my pages and have that form there. Now this photo form is not a full page. It's just used within the page. But because I've co-located it here, it just makes things a little easier to navigate. Plus, since we're in Nuxt and we have file-based routing enabled, this actually means I could view that photo form component in isolation. I could, in the browser, I could go to /photos/partials/photo form and actually develop that component just all by itself, which can sometimes be useful, right? And by the way, you could add some rules to remove these partial routes in production so you don't actually have a route that's just this weird kind of floating component in production. Okay, so you can absolutely copy this convention that I'm talking about with you, or you can come up with your own. The point is that you have a naming convention for your routes. It's going to make things more predictable for you as the developer, but it's also going to make things more predictable for your users. All right. Tip number 5 for these more maintainable apps or these large-scale apps is wrap your third-party code. No, not all third-party code, but I'll get to that more in just a moment. Now, where did this idea kind of come from? Well, I've done it in apps of my own, but Josh Deltner, who has a e-commerce, I believe they sell like truck accessories or something like that. It's an e-commerce app that is built on Nuxt. And he wrote this great blog post on Nuxt Enterprise Patterns Provider Abstractions. And it's basically this idea of wrapping third-party code. Well, why would we consider doing this? Number one, it decreases your chance of third-party lock-in. And number two, it increases the surface area for app-specific optimizations. Have no idea what I'm talking about? Well, let's take a look at a quick example. So Axios is a third-party dependency we're all probably fairly familiar with. Let's say we wanted to wrap Axios because we weren't super sure we were going to continue using this in the future. So what we might do is we might create a wrapper class called HTTP. And then we'd have a get method on that wrapper class. And then under the hood, all we're really doing is calling Axios, right? Now, the details of this syntax are not really important. The point is you're wrapping the third-party thing in your own custom thing, okay? Now, does this just, I mean, what are we just charging by the line? Is that why we're doing this? Well, the real reason is because now we can switch out that third-party code in one single place. So let's pretend we want to change out Axios for fetch. All right, we could do it just in this HTTP. That's a lot of T's, y'all. We can do that just in this class and not throughout the entire application. In fact, people who are using this HTTP class in other parts of the app, they don't even have to know that the underlying dependency changed, right? They just keep using this class as they always have. All right. So that's a good reason to wrap some of this third-party stuff. Now, I'm not saying wrap all your third-party stuff, but wrap some of your third-party stuff that, you know, maybe you're not sure if this is the best provider yet. Maybe, you know, maybe it's a payment provider and you don't want to be locked into a single one. You want to be able to switch it out quickly later. Okay. All right. By the way, this also makes it very apparent to extend some of these third-party things sometimes. So for instance, maybe you want to do a particular thing whenever an AJAX request fails, okay? Now that's as easy as putting that thing in your custom class. Now alert, I mean, this is a little on the nose, right? But you get the idea. Another idea might be wrapping up caching with your AJAX provider. Once again, just an example. And I know Axios has like interceptors, but not all libraries are hookable like Axios is. And so you kind of have to do this or nothing. All right, so not only can you do this with functions, but you can also do this with components as well. So for instance, I have this app icon component here that wraps the font awesome icon and the MD icon. It basically gives me a single component I can use to support both icon types. Okay, so you can use it for different kinds of things. Tip 6 here is interact with backends via an SDK. All right, so we've all done number 1 here, I think. And the problem is this is ripe for typos. If your backend API changes, if something like that happens, you have to go throughout your whole code base and change these things. But when you're using it in SDK, you only have to make the updates inside of the SDK. Plus, with the SDK, you typically have a shorter line to call, and you're going to have like an object or something that you can call dot, and then you can have autocomplete options of what all is available on that thing, right? So you're not working with, I call this a magic string, these strings that mean more than they really ought to. So if you wrap your APIs with an SDK, you don't have these magic strings floating around. And it's more fault tolerant, okay? Now, you could write these SDKs yourself, depending on your use case, but there's also a lot of backends out there who have these kind of SDKs already built in for you. So one of those is Firebase. This is an excellent backend as a service solution. We use this in the Vue.js 3 masterclass at Vue School. There's also Supabase, which is an open source alternative to Firebase. And I really actually enjoy Supabase because it's a SQL database. It's Postgres SQL, but it works a lot like Supabase, but with the relationship database kind of model to it. If you're working with Laravel, there's this Laravel query builder package, which I won't get into, but definitely check it out if you're into Laravel. All right. Lastly here, just tip number 7 is testing. Basically what I'm saying is just do it. Okay. Your future self will thank you. Once again, this is one of those kind of things where I don't have like data or anything like that, but experience has told me there have been times when I wrote tests and yeah, maybe it cost me a little bit of time, but there have been other times where I didn't write tests and I ended up really regretting it when the regression came later on down the line. The big reason this is important for your large scale applications is that it's going to provide you with the confidence to refactor. When you have a large scale application, it's going to be an absolute must that you refactor things along the way because business goals pivot, more features need to be added, things need to be refactored so that a particular thing can scale a certain way. And if you don't have the tests in place, you aren't going to have that confidence to do the refactor. And ultimately, you're either going to break something or you're not going to do the refactor and you're going to limit your application. Okay. So you got to have your tests for these large scale applications. Some tips for testing: start early. It's a lot harder to integrate testing in a project that already exists, not technically speaking, but momentum wise. TDD, I encourage you to do it or don't. The idea here is that a lot of people say they look at TDD and it's not the approach they want to take, and then they throw out testing with TDD. I don't want you to throw out testing with TDD. I don't care if you write your test before you write your code or after you write your code. The point is write the test sometime. Okay. Also, make sure you're running your test in a pipeline. This one's also bit me before too. If you don't run your tests in the pipeline, nobody will run them. Plain and simple. Nobody's going to run them if you don't have them running automatically in the pipeline, and they'll go stale, they'll go old, and they'll be useless. All right. Lastly, tooling, of course, use the recommended tooling for testing. All right, y'all, that is my time and that is my talk. Before I leave you, I just wanted to quickly mention these courses that we've put out at Vue School. Some of my favorite right now are the TypeScript with Vue.js 3 course, the Pinia course, and I'm really excited about the Rapid Testing with Vitis course. We've been working with Anthony Fu on this, and he has been an excellent instructor in this course. It's really exciting. And by the way, we just released the first lesson of a Laravel Backends for Vue.js 3 course that I'm really excited about as well. You might just see this Laravel query builder that I talked about earlier in action in this course. Now, if you are working on a large-scale app, you're a corporate team, and you need help training your developers, then you can check out our Vue Corporate Training Package, where we offer all of our video courses, our live workshops. We also have bi-weekly support sessions, and a database for hiring Vue developers. So if you are a corporate team building a large-scale app, then we definitely want you to visit vueschool.io/Vue Corporate Training. We can help you out with what you're building. All right. And then finally, we do have some upcoming live workshops. Our workshops are these very hands-on experiences where you get to do coding challenges. I'll walk you through new features and different things about Vue.js, all live on a video call where you can ask questions and all this good stuff. And so these are just some of the ones we've got coming up. One of the most exciting ones, this free one here at the bottom of the screen, is especially tailored towards tech leads and engineering managers. And during the event, you'll learn about the latest training and certifications available for you and your team to stay up to date with the latest Vue practices and techniques. So check out all these workshops at vueschool.io/workshops. Thank you all very much for your time, and I enjoyed being here.
Don't worry, you are not going to be left without a ton of questions.
All right.
I am also very excited because I love the work you do. So I, of course, have questions too. Number one.
Okay.
What OS are you using?
That's an easy one. It is Mac OS. Yeah.
I am actually laughing about this now because I have a 2019 MacBook Pro with the Intel. It's totally overheating now. It's not happy with me. So y'all, if you hear background noise, it is now my window open to try to cool it down. So now the next one, I'm excited because there's also another course that goes into this, but someone wants to learn TypeScript. Any good resources for that?
Definitely. We have two courses. We have a beginner's TypeScript course, like his fundamental TypeScript, and then we have a TypeScript with Vue course. So definitely check out both of those. And y'all, listen, I was one of those people who TypeScript scared me. But to be honest, if you sprinkle it in just a little bit here and there and just kind of you pick it up slowly, and after a while it becomes second nature. Like you start relating it to things you learned in PHP with classes and interfaces and things or whatever. But it's scary for me, but it's really not as bad as it seems. Let me put it that way.
I agree with that. And I'm about to post this in the chat as well, I'm going to be taking that course too. I also have been, there's a book called, I actually showed it earlier when I was talking about books. Learning TypeScript from Josh Goldberg. He's actually coming on my show like every other week, and we're going through it chapter by chapter.
Nice.
On the live stream.
That's awesome.
I'm just like, it's another resource. So I did link the GitHub for it, so that way people can, the repo can go take a look. And I'm excited because it's like, for me, it'll complement really well with taking Vue School's courses, because I'm like, I want to ask somebody questions.
Yeah.
But you can't always do that. And now you can.
Now you can.
So I am excited for that. Now
share that link in the chat for the conference here. I want to check that out.
Yeah, definitely. And I will also tweet it out with this afterwards with both of the TypeScript ones from Vue School and yours. So y'all keep an eye out for that. All right.
Hey, Jen, that is one actually, one other good point about TypeScript. Like I could still learn plenty because TypeScript is like this deep hole.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But if you know like the top layer, like you're getting 90% of the value. Like that's another good point about TypeScript.
It is also something that it like, I don't know how to describe it. Like it can be really hard to just like understand that part and really conceptualize. And then you're like, oh, I finally got it.
Yeah.
But I don't get it. But I got it. Wait, do I get it? Wait.
You're living in my head. Yeah, I know the feeling.
I feel like that's how, and I feel like this really does come like, do you have any good materials to learn all about patterns? I feel like that's something I've struggled with in my own journey. And once you know that, it helps with any language. But what
sure.
there?
I would say there's a really good book. Oh shoot, I can't think of the name of it right now. It's a pretty old book actually, but it's like Patterns for Modern Applications or something like that I've read before. It was written in like, I don't know, the 90s maybe. So some of it's probably a little out of date, but I actually draw a lot of inspiration from that a lot of times. I'll have to find that and I'll tweet it out. So my Twitter is @DanielKelly_IO. I will find that book and tweet it out. It's really good. As far as view patterns specifically are concerned, I don't know of a single resource for that. Honestly, Michael Thiessen has some really excellent content, and like he's really great at nailing down concepts, and so I would definitely suggest some of his stuff. We have a few blog posts at Vue School with that kind of content in it, but yeah, there's things out there. If you Google it, I don't know, ask ChatGPT. That might not be a great idea, but
I love that. And y'all, what did you say your Twitter was? Your first and last name, right?
yes, it's at Daniel Kelly, all one word,
Whatever
underscore
direction this is.
IO.
So that way you can see his name really quick.
Yep.
All right, we do have more questions though. If you are building a large scale application with Composition API and Options API, which would you choose and why?
Nowadays, I would choose the Composition API because I'm more familiar with it. Teaching at Vue School, we have to, use kind of the more latest and greatest stuff. It's what people expect. So I'm definitely used to the Composition API more. But not only that, I think the window for abstracting things is a lot clearer with the Composition API. Like there's a lot better view as to when I can take this bundle of code that's specific to a certain thing and move it to its own file and then use it in two different places. It's a lot easier to see that when you're using the Composition API. So that's one of the biggest reasons I would do that.
I like that because I feel like I've only been coding for, oh goodness, like 6 months now. And people are like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, at the moment, it's because it was what I was taught. That's what I got. It's the most comfortable. And I love how, like, as we learn, we're able to be like, okay, now we can really compare. Why are we using this? And you answered both. It was great.
Awesome.
All right. What about atomic design for naming components?
Atomic design. You know what? To be honest, I've read about it. And I haven't adopted it for anything, so I guess it didn't impress me that much. Yeah, I know people who like hardcore pound on that, but I'm not the one to ask.
All right. And what is your opinion about regarding ordering a Vue single file component?
Okay, cool. The official Vue.js docs now for the Composition API, I don't know, maybe for the Options API too. I don't look at it that much anymore, but for the Composition API, the docs do script setup first, and then template, and then style. So that's kind of that's kind of what I've adopted as well. I think it was kind of like a Svelte thing, but it works. Yeah, it's cool. In the end, I don't think it really matters.
All right. And we got a long one. Which one is better for a large scale Vue app? Adding all components directly to the components folder, or creating subfolders for related components inside of the components folder?
Yeah, so at one point I did kind of espouse the idea of putting them all directly in the root components folder, and I think there's some credibility for that. I think if you mix that with that partials directory idea I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think there's some value there as well. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you and your team agree on something, I think that's going to be the best option. I will say that when you start nesting things, the decisions you have to make are higher. There's more of them you have to make when you start nesting things in that components directory. So that's just something you need to think about.
Thank you. And do you suggest using Inversify.js for large Vue applications?
I'm not familiar with it.
Fair enough. So not yet, maybe.
But not yet,
someday?
but maybe.
Yeah.
Have to look that up.
And then could you suggest a file structure for the components folder? Well, I think you kind of just did, but if you could have your perfect world, what would you do?
Yeah, in a perfect world, I probably would have like all my base components in their own directory, because that's an easy decision, right? I would probably at that point, if you use the partials folder for your resource specific things that are located with those pages, You're already kind of grouping together your logical concerns in terms of your file structure. You've got all your resources have their own components, right? So other than that, like what else would you break up in your components directory? Maybe you could have a folder for, I don't know, maybe you have some really complicated buttons or something, and you've got buttons that are stacked like 3 components deep or something, but it's not going to happen. Like if I do have a complicated component, use that naming convention of just prefixing the child with the parent. Then if you've got 3 components that are all related to one another, then you have them all right there together in your file system based on the name. So that usually works out pretty well. Yeah.
My pages and components and layouts, I know they're all different folders, but they're all like blog post, I think it's blog comp for the component. And somebody looked at it and they're like, Jen, what are you doing? And I'm like, you know what? I'm new at this. I get that that's not the right naming convention, but I love how you mentioned about like just putting them so they match at the beginning, because that makes so much more sense. So thank you. And y'all go follow Daniel and Vue School. And thank you for going through all of the workshops we have coming up. And thank you again. And up next, we have break. So thank you, Daniel.